Hey guys, so this is mostly gonna be a talking video because I was doing a build and I thought that it's gonna be something special, but it turned out into nothing really special with just high DPS weapon. So in this video I want to talk about specifically Spectral Throw, Atziri's Disfavour, and Spectral Throw's projectiles hitbox. So here's the thing, the Spectral Throw, and this may be a bit old news but it hasn't really changed. If you check Wiki, Spectral Throw says this: the size of the projectile is half of the weapon's base range, rounded down. Passive skills that affect melee range have no effect. Most weapons have longer weapons have 13 range, which means that the hitbox of the projectile would be 6, because 13 divided by 2 and rounded down. 6 units hitbox, which doesn't sound much. Now, the reason why I did this build, because Atziri's Disfavour is the only weapon that has such insane weapon range, and it is base weapon range, unless I misunderstand, but it says base weapon range, and it does give +10 to weapon range as a base, because the weapon range, the base, shows up as a stat and not like a conditional modifier, right? So with this, Atziri's Disfavour, Spectral Throw projectiles hitbox should be 11. Right? Because 23 divided by 2 and rounded down. So compare, like when you think about it, 6 unit hitbox and then 11 unit hitbox. That's almost double the size. So I thought, Spectral Throw, each projectile, let me remove the GMP. When you throw it, it hits multiple times while it's traveling up, and then when it's returning against the same target. Obviously you would want slower projectiles, and it does the most damage when it's spinning like at the end of its reach, because that's when it stays at the same spot the longest. So my idea was, well, if I'm getting almost twice bigger a hitbox, I should see at least 1 or 2 extra hits improvement per throw. Normally with a normal weapon you get like 4 hits. If you position really well, you get like 5 hits. So I thought, okay, adding 2 extra hits plus Atziri's Disfavour is a high DPS weapon. This one is 820 physical DPS. I thought, okay, so that should be like really good damage, and I did craft a build. 1.7. This is not an optimized build by any means. This is kind of like a rough estimate. 1.7 million DPS per projectile per hit. So, and the projectile would hit, let's say, 4 times if you position properly, and more if this weapon range works. So you essentially multiply this damage by 1.7 million by at least 4 times, so you get 6.8 million DPS. That sounds good if the target doesn't move, obviously. But if it adds an extra 2 hits, let's say 1.7 million times let's say 6 hits, now we have 10 million DPS. 10 would be amazing with this build. So I did quite a bit of testing with the self-poison, 100% chance to poison. I removed all of my damage except a bit of Here's damage, so I can test. If we only had testing damage, I wouldn't need to even suffer through setting up the testing scenario. So I went to the Kuduko essentially and made my damage pretty much non-existent except for a bit of Here's damage, so that I can see how many poison stacks I apply to myself with the golden rule. And that's how I checked how many hits I do against the target, essentially. Because if I get poisoned by 4 hits with a single throw, it means it hit 4 times on the target. And the target had 100% chance to be poisoned, then cursed. So I did that. Absolutely no difference. I'm doing 4 hits with a normal weapon, with any other weapon, and 4 hits with Atziri's Disfavour. So that immediately was a big disappointment. So I thought I'm gonna test Cyclone as well. Maybe Atziri's Disfavour is bugged. You know, the change was like pretty recent. Maybe they forgot to code it. Like maybe it's just displaying that it's getting +10 weapon range, but maybe it's still at like +2 weapon range like it used to be. So I checked the Cyclone, and although it was level 1 Cyclone, and at 3 stages it only gained 13 units radius Cyclone as a base, and then the extra each weapon range, as I understand, increased the Cyclone AoE by 8%. So the difference should have been 80% increased AoE, as I understand, unless I'm misunderstanding it. I could pretty much barely see no difference in AoE between this Atziri's Disfavour and a normal weapon. The difference was like one tiny step. Although I was using level 1 Cyclone and the base radius was only 14, so it wasn't getting that much scaling. With a high level Cyclone, you would be able to reach higher stages and get plus flat radius, and then that flat radius would get increased by the percentage increased AoE from the weapon range, and then it would make a bigger difference. But like I expected, this almost adds twice bigger range, right? 23 versus 13 units weapon range. That should be like noticeable, but it was pretty much almost invisible difference. So that kind of completely destroyed my will to play this build, because without the bigger hitbox, without extra hits, it just becomes a normal Spectral Throw build. Well, this is Impale as well. Normal Spectral Throw with the high DPS weapon. So I'm gonna be quitting the build unless someone knows what is wrong with this. Maybe it is bug. Maybe it's supposed to work like that. Maybe the hitbox between 6 unit hitbox and 11 unit hitbox is pretty much meaningless. Is there any way to kind of, I don't know. The damage obviously feels great with this weapon as soon as you start mapping, because it's like very high DPS weapon, but if it doesn't really add any extra hits, then what's the point? Especially because Spectral Throw is actually pretty terrible in Sanctum. You want to stay in the same line for the projectiles to return through the same target, but you have to move to the side all the time, so you're gonna be missing a lot of projectiles and losing a lot of DPS anyway. So having 10 million DPS with the Spectral Throw in Sanctum would just barely be enough. While having like 3 million DPS with Herald of Thunder, it feels absolutely amazing because you're doing that damage all the time. With this, you wouldn't be doing that damage all the time, and you have to be positioned at the right distance all the time as well. Another thing, I was using Point Blank. Point Blank, another thing, loses damage as it kind of starts returning, because it's the projectile travel distance, not the distance from the origin. So essentially just imagine the duration of the projectile. The longer it is active, the less damage it's gonna start doing. So Point Blank, like, it would still work well enough at this distance. When it's returning, it will still have some increased damage or some more damage, and this is with the helmet enchantment. But you really need to be positioned properly. As soon as the target moves closer to you, you're gonna start hitting like 2 or 3 times only instead of 4 or 5 times. The last time I played Spectral Throw, I believe I said to myself, never play Spectral Throw again until they rework it. And Spectral Throw can be fun, but for this league I think in general it's just not really suited. And it is kind of old skill. It hasn't been changed in very long time. It has received couple changes, but they are pretty much meaningless. Also in 3.13 there was a change which I'm still not sure what it meant. Projectiles from Spectral Throw are now considered 50% larger against monsters when checking for collision. So does that mean that it's the base hitbox is now more than half of the weapon range? Or is it just a hitbox? But I mean, if it's a hitbox, it has to, if it's collision, it has to also apply the hit. So I'm not sure. If you got some other ideas with the Atziri's Disfavour, let me know in the comments below, because otherwise I'm just gonna be selling it and doing a Dancing Dervish build, which I already planned and started, but I may still return to this. And by the way, this was a champion going with the Fortify, so that I would be decently tanky. Going with Impale, not even getting any cluster jewels, but the damage should be okay if you can position yourself properly. But then again, I don't want to do this because this is just too normal build. So that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you got some other ideas. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.